Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Perf Sprint for Web. Um, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you who have joined us live on Facebook and YouTube. And just before we start with the actual event, let me just give you a little overview about the event and about what we are all about. So we are all about web, and our mission is to create an amazingly vibrant community of web developers out there. And we are all about events basically related to the web. And in web, we are going to cover the front end. So it would be about Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, vanilla JavaScript, HTML, CSS, etc. Then we'll also have events in the backend technologies like Node.js, Dino, PHP, Python, Go, etc. And about different tools like Docker, Kubernetes, GCP, Azure, AWS, and about techniques like build, bundle, performance, SEO, etc. This event is all about performance, but in the front end space. So we will be seeing a few sessions today that would be focused on building performance apps uh, using technologies and tools like Angular, React, Vue, and Svelte. I'd like to quickly mention our team. So we have Ashok Vishwakarma, who's a Google developer expert based out in India. Then we have Gaurav Chauhan, who is the founder of the Youth Project, which is like a community that focuses on empowering students and making them job ready. Then the third one is me. I'm Siddharth Ajmera, and I'm a Google developer expert based out in Sydney, Australia. And finally, we have Shrishti. So Shrishti is a senior developer at Advantage Technologies, and she's also a vibrant community member and a speaker at various conferences, and also actively participates in the community. And the event is all about web performance. So we will be seeing a few events. This is going to be the whole agenda. So we'll first start with our first session, that is about effective data visualization in D3 and how we can make it more performant and useful using Svelte. Then the second session is going to be conducted by Santosh Yadav, who's a Google developer expert in Angular, and he'll be talking about optimizing an Angular app. Third, we will be having a session by Mr. Tarun Mangukia. He's the CTO of Icon Scout, and he'll be talking about building web applications using Vue.js that are also scalable. And finally, we will be hosting Mr. Ashok Vishwakarma, who is also a member of All About Web. And he will be talking about moving away from classes in React, as the whole React ecosystem is doing right now. And with that, let me shortly introduce Matthias, who is going to talk about effective data visualization in Svelte and D3. And Matthias is a data visualization specialist for this company called HiSCH. And so I'll be adding Matthias.
Hi, everyone.
Yep. So, Matthias, it could be all over to you now.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and I'm really happy to be here. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about Svelte D3 and how those two are important for performance. And I just started my company, which is called HICH, difficult German word, here in Germany, where I do data visualization consulting for companies and also universities, and where I use Svelte a lot. But when you have a company, you also have to think about Excel, of course. And I guess you all have heard about different sorts of spreadsheets. Excel is just one example. And just this morning, I sat down putting some numbers into Excel because I need to see how it goes with the money and all that. And the nice thing about Excel, that is that you can specify cells that are dependent on other cells. So spreadsheets in Excel and everywhere else are kind of reactive. And when I was sitting down there, all these numbers per se were quite boring to me. And I thought about how would I program the user interface of Excel actually? So what would happen when I would, for example, change one of these numbers? When I change the 4 to the 10, of course, then the sum is adjusting to that. And how could you program this UI? Well, basically, one thing you could do is you have like a shadow spreadsheet where you perform your updates and you calculate this spreadsheet, and then you just compare it to the original spreadsheet. And then you see, okay, well, in this cell B5 and B7, there are differences. So I update these elements. And then I thought, well, yeah, that is an approach that I well know because React is doing like that, Vue is doing like that, Angular is also doing like that. They call this shadow spreadsheet just a virtual DOM. So that's everything contains. So the virtual DOM is basically first a copy of your DOM, and then when some values gets updated, they get updated to the virtual DOM, and then the whole virtual DOM is all the time compared to your actual DOM, so that you can surgically do the updated cells. And then I thought, well, that is quite a lot of work to program, and it might be also not good in terms of performance because I have to do this comparison all the time. Is there not a better way? And a better way would be to just say, okay, let my framework know that this cell where I have the sum is just dependent on all these other cells here. And when the framework knows it, it just needs to update this cell later on when something in the column changes. So why should we compare all the time the virtual DOM to the real DOM? And in fact, I have to say, I borrowed this spreadsheet example from another talk on YouTube, which is from Rich Harris. And Rich Harris is the creator of Svelte. And Svelte is a fairly new framework, which has the opinion that we don't know that we don't have to use the virtual DOM. I can really recommend this talk to you. And he discovered this new way, or he introduced this new way of Svelte to the rescue. And Svelte is not another framework, it's a compiler, because you can write Svelte components like Vue components, but Svelte then does at build time a new JavaScript file for you where your whole application is in. And the thing is that you don't have to do some heavy virtual DOM to DOM comparisons later on in your application on the browser side, on the client side. You all have these calculations in the build time, so when your application is built, and that's basically on your computer and not on the computer of your clients. So you save a lot of computational time. So let's see what we get with Svelte. So first of all, you get very small shipping sizes because your applications are just vanilla JavaScript and they are optimized for that, what they are doing. You don't have to have a library to ship. So for example, when you have Vue, you have to ship the whole Vue library to the browser of the client that it can do these comparisons to the virtual DOM. Same goes for React and Angular. You don't have that in Svelte. And I just want to add two more things because we are talking about performance today. And one of those is CSS animations on the fly. We'll show you that later. And another thing is, because we are a compiler now and we have the compiler at the build step of our application, we can also easily implement server-side rendering, which is also very good for your performance. And I also show you that later. I just told you that I do data visualization. And data visualization means that I need to build web applications with very rich graphs or charts or very creative ways of showing data basically to the user, which is also then interactive in the end. And for that, you usually use a library which is called D3, Data-Driven Documents. And D3 is also a very nice framework. And now the question is, how would you combine D3, which makes you all the graphics, to the Svelte compiler, to our Svelte framework? And the thing is that you can divide the tasks a little bit. So you can use Svelte for everything which has to do with your DOM. So when you want to manipulate DOM elements, for example, we can use Svelte. You can use Svelte to write your whole application in a component style, as you know it from Vue, for example. You could also use some special tricks from Svelte with our actions and transitions. So these are basically certain functions that run on the DOM elements and which make your application very performant. And on the other hand, you have D3, and D3 is used for all the mathematical stuff. For example, for the scales, so when you really want to transfer your data to the pixels on your screen. D3 is also used when you want to calculate shapes or other graphics, or when you want to interpolate your data. So let me just show an example how that could look like. So this is a Svelte app, how I would write it in a browser. And here on the right, you see the output. And I just want to show you what this simple app does. Here you have a checkbox with just show curve. And when I click that, it shows up a curve. And when I click that, so then the curve disappears again. That's everything it does. And this is a data visualization, basically, which comes from underlying data. And I just show you that data. And this is basically an array of objects which have age and temperature properties. So what you see here is basically the body temperature of a 24-year-old guy over like half a year and how that varies. So that's the data we want to show. And then I go back to our base app. And you might, if you know Vue, for example, this might be very familiar to you because we write Svelte components a little bit like Vue components. We have a script part where we put all the JavaScript in. We have an HTML part where you put all the HTML in. And of course, you can optionally also have a style part where you can put some CSS in. That's not the case here because that's very basic application now. But what you see here, when we go to the HTML part first, we have this input with the label. So this is just that one here above. And then we have this graph component, and the graph component is imported here in the JavaScript from another Svelte component that we'll look at in a moment. Let me first show you that I also have this show variable, which holds the state of this checkbox, basically. So if we should show the curve or not. And initially it's false because it wasn't shown initially. And then you can see that I take this variable here and bind it here to the checked property of our checkbox. And with that simple trick in Svelte, these values are just bound. So every time I check or uncheck the checkbox here, the show variable will switch from false to true and vice versa. And then I take this show variable also as a property to my graph component, and I put the data into my graph component. And now let's look at the interesting parts, how this graph component looks like, because that should draw this line here. Of course, that looks a little bit more complicated, but let's go to the HTML part first. That's my HTML part. That's everything I have. And that's an SVG, a scalable vector graphic. That's the way how we used to draw paths in the browser. And just inside that, I define a path, which is exactly this purple one here. And if you know a little bit SVG path, you always have this D property where you put your data in. And of course, you cannot just put your data, this array I showed you before, in there. You have to transform it to some coordinates here in the browser, and that's what this path line function does. And that's exactly something we define here in JavaScript here. And that's exactly a function which is coming from D3. Here we use just D3 to transform our data to coordinates here in the SVG. And you can easily put that JavaScript here in your HTML part. So that's very convenient. And then there's also a style text. So that's where this stroke, for example, gets purple. So that's the CSS styles I showed you before. But the more interesting stuff is that one here, transition : move, because that one is the thing which tells the visualization that it needs to move when I show it or I don't show it. And the whole path additionally is wrapped in these maybe a little bit weird appearing if condition, which just says if show, then show me the path. And then also this transition knows, oh, I'm going to be showed now, so I need to run the transition. Oh, there was, or another possibility, of course, when show gets false again, then also this transition is fired here. We have to look how this works. So where does this move come from? And if we have a look in the beginning of my JavaScript part here, I have here import move from move.js. And so let's go to move.js. And that's just an exported function. And there is a lot of these functions in Svelte that you can use out of the box, but you can also define these functions on your own, how I did it here. And what I did here is I have this definition of the move function, and it takes a node. This is basically the SVG path that I put in. And then I can define an object with some properties, which is maybe the duration of this animation, or if there's any delay, and I just assign some standard values to them. The first thing I do in this function is I just want to get the path length, how it is at the moment. So I can just take the node, which this function takes here, and there is a JavaScript function get total length, which just gives you back the length value of this path here. And then I assign a style to this node, and that's the style is called a stroke dash array, and that's a little data visualizer trick if you want, because we assign a dash array to that stroke, which is just the path length where you have a visible stroke, and then again the path length with the invisible stroke. But that's not that important right now, so just you assign that stroke dash. And then I return an object which holds the duration, how long that animation should last, which holds also the delay. And there is this CSS property. And that's now the point where we have to talk about performance, because that CSS property just takes this template string here, where the CSS property stroke dash offset is reassigned to u times path length. And now we have to know what u is. So these parameters T and U are values from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0 respectively that run from 1 to 0 during the animation. So when the animation starts, T is 0, U is 1, and when the animation ends, T is 1 and U is 0. And with that, I can animate this movement of the path, basically, because I multiply the path length to this U parameter here. And now the nice thing is, you can see this is CSS, basically, and I assign this to this CSS property here. That means we have Svelte at the same time, and Svelte is now a compiler, so we are at build time. And at build time, I can take this here and build real CSS animations from that. So what you actually see here is not a JavaScript-based animation, so that's not controlled from JavaScript, that's controlled from CSS. And that's really important when we talk about performance, because CSS is not running in your JavaScript thread. So your JavaScript thread is free, and it does have to manage the animation here. That's just CSS. And another thing is, when I just toggle this very fast, you see that it goes smooth like the user would expect. It just turns around and builds the path again or unbuilds it, whatever you like. And that's a thing that we get with the CSS animations at the same time. So that's how you would build a very performant visualization of this path here, because when we go to the JavaScript output and we go to our initial app, you see that is what our Svelte compiler is basically building, and this is just vanilla JavaScript. Recommend you to look on YouTube if you're interested into the inner workings of Svelte, how that compiler really works. And the next thing is, we are a compiler, so we can also use server-side rendering directly. So I could just tell the compiler, well, could you turn me this app into server-side rendering? So let me just go to our graph component, and then I say, now I want to have an output for server-side rendering, and then let's just see what we get here is really a HTML string where my SVG is in, where the path is in, and so that is built beforehand and does not need to build by JavaScript on the client side. So this also is very good for the performance in your applications. So the question is, now it's very nice to show you these little examples, of course, but I guess you would be interested to see if this also scales and if this works out in real life. And indeed, I did a lot of visualizations with Svelte and D3 already. And I just want to show you this one here as an example, which uses exactly these temperature profiles that I showed you in the first example, because that is data from a study where researchers analyzed the body temperature of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people over the last 150 years. And I was really interested to look at the personal temperature profiles of people. And I just collected some of those study participants here. And if you click on them, you see that you get their temperature curve over their age, basically. And what I want to show you with that visualization is that your body temperature is not 37 degrees all the time, Celsius in that case, but it's varying a lot, and it also depends how old you are and if you are female or male. And this is exactly a path which is animated through a CSS animation, which is built by Svelte. And I mean, that's a very small one, for example. Let's go to another one where I also use Svelte. This is called the Circle of Hope. And what I wanted to visualize here is the childhood mortalities of children across the world. So what you see here in that circle is we have countries here around. So each angle of the circle is basically a country. And if you hover over them, you get the childhood mortalities in this country. For example, this is Ghana now in Africa. And these larger circles here, they show you the childhood mortality in 1998, 2008, and then 2018. And you can see that it's going down. And in the middle, you get the full view. And this app, of course, needs to be very performant because there is a lot of data behind. and basically the user can hover around it very fast, and it should be performant and not blocking your whole animation thread, and that works perfectly fine with Svelte. And another one is when you have even more data. I can show you that one here. This visualization, for example, is showing flight prices from flights between Stockholm and Frankfurt, because I used to live in these both cities once a while ago. And I always wondered, is there a difference when you book your flight 30 days ahead of the departure, or is it better to book just a few days before departure? So I tracked flight prices. And what you can see here, this is for a certain departure date. So this is last year, April 24th. And these are certain flights that you see here. And I just select one out of those. So this one, for example, this flight costs 167 euros when you book it 30 days before departure. And it is quite constant over the time. This is just the final price just at the day of departure. But there are also like flights like this one, which is low in the beginning and high in the end. And you can see that it's quite performant and animating very well. And this is just one day, but now you can go over a couple of days, or you can select more days. And this needs to stay, of course, performant. And here also Svelte is very good. You could use server-side rendering plus CSS animations. And in that case, I also used HTML canvas to draw all the lines, which is then an HTML trick to make your app more performant. So I go away from SVG to HTML canvas in that case. And that's, of course, possible in Svelte too. So I think I could show you now in this little talk that with Svelte, we have small application sizes. We have no libraries to ship. So the browser of your client will have a lot less to compute. We also get these CSS animations quite easily. Of course, you could program that on your own, but that takes a lot of lines of code. And it's also very cumbersome to write it. So Svelte gives you that for free. You've seen that. You just assign this CSS property in that object. And you also get server-side rendering for free. And I want to mention here Zapper, which is the Svelte application maker, which is a framework like Next or Gatsby or Next.js, which is but running with Svelte, and then gives you also some nice code splitting possibilities and stuff like that. So check that out definitely too. And yeah, with that, I hope I could show you that Svelte is a good choice when it comes to performance, but not only when it comes to performance. I would say Svelte is the moment my favorite choice when I do data visualization. And yeah, if there are any questions, let me know. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful session, and like I, I think I need to appreciate you for those demos. Those visualizations were really cool, and I really like when there is like we are able to visualize in such a manner that like just after seeing that you get the glimpse out of what it is trying to show. So that's really wonderful. So there were a few people who were asking like if we can actually share the links of the demo to those people so that they can even try them out themselves. So
Yes.
yes, like,
We could maybe share the slides if there is a possibility, because all the links
yes.
are there, or I could also post it here if that's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think the best way would be we'll be sharing it on our Twitter handle. So if you can share on your Twitter
Yeah,
handle, we'll retweet it so that
yeah,
everyone can actually get it. So
yeah,
guys, you can please follow It's All About Web, and there you can actually find out all the content. We'll be trying to share it over there.
yes.
So Chris is actually asking one question, and let me just highlight it just a second. And Chris is actually asking about the library that is Pancake. So, have you used the Pancake library?
Just say it again. Which labeling do you mean?
Pancake. That is.
Pancake, yeah. I have not used it for my projects yet, but it's very interesting. Maybe just to explain. Pancake is a library also made by Rich Harris, the creator of Svelte, and it uses responsive charts without any JavaScript. So it's just CSS HTML tricks that are used here. And I tried it for some very little private projects, and it's really cool. So I would definitely recommend to use it. For my big company projects, I actually don't use it right now because it, of course, when you use a library for visualization, you also restrict yourself a little bit all the time. So I tend to use the plain D3 all the time because there I have the full freedom to create everything I want. That's just the reason for it, but I would definitely recommend to have a look at it. Yeah, and I have also I will also send a link to that to the Twitter handle.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. So, guys, if you have any other question, please you can post it on the YouTube comments, and we'll take care of it. So let's be around for a minute or two, and let's see if we have any other question. Meanwhile, I want to share with you guys that we have this event is actually a series of events. So the next event, that is optimizing of the Angular application. I hope it has already started, and you can actually go to this link, that is bit.ly/AAW-Santosh, and you will be directed over there. And that is about Angular. Yes, and let's see if we have any other questions. Cool. I think we don't have it any right now. So again, Matthias, thank you so much for your time, and it was really a wonderful thing to learn from you about Svelte. I really love the syntax because coming from different front-end background, I really find it refreshing and also very lightweight. So I'm also looking forward to like have deep dive into Svelte. Let's hope how
Yeah.
it goes on. And I really feel that this should actually become a very good community out of Svelte, because Svelte is a kind of a new technology when compared to Vue, Angular, or React, and we don't have that much support in that. But yeah, it's growing every day, and I never found someone who is saying anything bad about Svelte, that oh, this syntax sucks or that sucks. So that's really a good thing actually.
Yeah, actually, I mean, when you go to GitHub, for example, and you look at the stars that Svelte already has, it's more than 30,000 now. So I think that's also a quite good argument to start with Svelte and to look into it, because I think it's really, it arrived in the community now.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to use.
Right, right. Completely. I agree to that. Okay, so thank you so much. And we'll be sharing everything on the Twitter handles. So please follow up there. And also, if you tweet using our hashtag that is all about web, we do have some merchandise that we want to ship to you. So just make sure that you do that. We'll be selecting a few people from there, and we'll be shipping you some good goodies that you will love. So stay safe, guys. Be at home, and I hope that you all are like taking care of yourself, and let's hope that this thing actually passes really good, really well, and really quickly. Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Bye bye.